Preliminary finals, Sydney versus North Melbourne. With Eddie Maguire, Dermot Brereton, Michael Voss, Mark McClure, Jared Healy, Brad Johnson, Alistair Lynch, David King in the War Room, and John Ralph with all the news. It's Sydney versus North. Welcome to footy's best coverage. This is Prelim Finals Footy on Fox.
Welcome everyone, thanks to Mazda BT50. Here are the Sydney Swans arriving at ANZ Stadium. Buddy Franklin, the man who plays his 350th game, the Australian of the Year, Adam Goodes, what a superstar he's been. And the man who hogged all the headlines right throughout the weekend and early this week, the on-again, off-again career of Brent Harvey. He's on again tonight and he'll need to be right on for the Kangaroos to cause a major upset in the preliminary final of 2014. Thanks to Mazda BT50. You're on the home of footy, Fox Footy, as we welcome our panel tonight. Alistair Lynch, three-time premiership champion of the Brisbane Lions. Michael Voss, three-time premiership champion of the Brisbane Lions, and Mark McClure, a three-time premiership champion of the Carlton Football Club. The boys who know how to get it done at the big dance are sitting alongside me. Welcome, fellas.
How good's this? It just gets bigger every week, and we've got two super impressive teams, Vossi. I mean, obviously we've got the #1 ranked team after the home and away season, the Sydney Swans. They got their best 22 players out there against North Melbourne, an emerging power, if you like, 6 on the trot, and they're full of confidence.
Yeah, Sydney are a super side, we know that. If there's one thing that North can't afford tonight is give away multiple goals in a row. If momentum swings against them, they won't wrestle it back. They had it against Essendon, they were able to fight their way back. They were able to get the start that they needed last week against Geelong, and they just hung on. But if they present that this week, then they'll just get rolled by a very good football team.
Round 4 was the last time they played, and they had in the side Derricks, Lewis Roberts Thompson and O'Keefe. And most of them aren't there anymore, so that was against them. They had 30 contested possessions against him, intercept possessions against him in that game from the half-back. So that won't happen. Now they've got Buddy, they've got Tippett, and they've also got Goodes. It's a little bit of difference between the three.
Yeah, it was 43 points by way of North Melbourne on that occasion in Sydney in the wet. It's been a bit of wet conditions up in Sydney during the week. Let's go up there to find Dermot Brereton, the 5-time premiership champion of the Hawthorn Football Club, and of course Brad Johnson, 364 games and knows what it's like to play in September in preliminary finals. Boys, first of all, the weather conditions, and welcome tonight to what's going to be a classic game of football. The winner goes through to the grand final.
Evening, Ed. Evening, guys. Evening, Jono. It's actually turned out a pretty nice day here. It's perfect conditions right now.
It is. It's absolutely fantastic. Remember back to round 23 it was when David King was out here walking around. It was that sloppy underfoot here at ANZ Stadium. I can tell you right now, this ground is in the best condition that I've seen it in some time. It's starting to get a little bit dewy underfoot, but outside of that, that's just because of the pure conditions we have here.
I'd go as far to say that it's actually in the best condition I've seen this ground. It's a little bit patchwork quilty, but the surface is quite solid. It will hold. We're just in this spooky part of the ground. I've got a feeling Cyril might have done his hamstring in this pocket, but he's done it in a few spots over the league.
You and Cyril do. We'll worry about that tomorrow when the Hawks play. But one player I'd like to talk about as well is Kane Turner, youngest player in the competition at the moment, and his last 2 efforts last week in the tight game against the Cats were sensational. And to me, Dermot, it's natural instincts that take over in this time of the game, and for him to absolutely put his head in the hole for one and then lay the big smother there on Selwood was great from a young player in the comp.
He's just a really good scrapper, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. Back to you, Ed.
Thanks, boys. We look forward to coming back to you a little bit later in the build-up to tonight's preliminary final between the Sydney Swans and North Melbourne. Let's go to the newsroom now. It's been a big day for news. Before we get into all the stuff at Essendon, Ralphie, what have you got for us on tonight's preliminary final?
Hello, Ed. No changes for either side on a spectacular night for football out at ANZ Stadium. So much suggestion around that potentially Joel Tippett might come into the North Melbourne side to play on his brother Kurt. That has not happened, so both sides unchanged. Craig Bird is the sub for Sydney, and Ryan Bastanak has built a nice little niche as the sub. He's the sub again for North Melbourne.
Good on you, mate. We'll come back to you, Ralph, in a few moments' time to go through what has been a massive day of news in football. Johnny Ralph's got everything, and that'll come up in a few moments' time. For Microsoft Surface Pro 3, time to go to the war room, and it really is a war room tonight because we've got a North Melbourne champion and a Sydney Swans champion. The 2-time premiership star from the Kangaroos, David King, and the Brownlow medalist from the Sydney Swans, Jared Healy. Good evening, boys. Welcome. This is going to be a ripping game tonight.
Oh, it'll be a belter, Ed. There's no doubt about that. I think that the Kangaroos come in for mine able to play with some freedom, have a bit of fun, not so much fun, Jerry, but really play with some extravagance and try and pinch a result. It's against all odds for me. They need someone to really bob up and have some sort of game, one out of the box, a Kuta-like game, which we'll touch on later on.
Well, they've got the chemistry right for mine, Ned, the Kangaroos, and they're the big improvers right now. Haven't lost for 6 weeks. If they go on again and if they improve again through this week, then I think there'll be some nervous moments for my old club. And Kingy, well, he's got the war paint on right now.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. They've got the Bondi billionaires up there, but the extravagance of North Melbourne, if they can play like millionaires, you never know, boys. Just throw caution to the wind and have a real go. Speaking of which, let's have a look at the finals history between these two sides. Let's go back, Lynchy, to the elimination final 2008 at this very ground, ANZ Stadium.
Yeah, in front of only 19,000, but Brent Harvey got off to a flyer. He was best for the Roos, had 20 disposals and 2 goals, and also he had a partner in crime in David Hale. And he's got a fair bit of hair on top of the head there, Big Dave, and he chipped in with a couple of goals. Jared McVeigh led the way with the Swans with 25 disposals, as did Goodsey. He was too powerful up forward with 3 with Barry Hall.
And then the only time they met was in a grand final in 1996, and it was Tony Lockett who opened the scoring for the Swans, while down the other end Brett Allison also kicked a goal and set up another, and it was Plugger kicked his 3rd for the quarter, pushing the Swans out to an 18-point lead at the first break.
Young Michael O'Loughlin with the one-hander, what a classy mark that was. And then there was Glenn Freeborn with 3 for the Roos in the second term to get him right into this game. Plugger finished with 6. He was outstanding again, as he always is. And then all of a sudden the Kangas win by 43 points, and Glenn Archer, Norm Smith medalist.
The King, Wayne Carey, and Dennis Pagan, old mate Anthony Rock there with the Centenary of Football Gold Cup for 1996, a well-deserved win by the North Melbourne side. I remember that day I sat behind the great Basher Williams. Could there be a better name to be called in football to intimidate your opponents than
Was
Basher
he a nice
Williams?
man?
He's a wonderful man. Basher is pretty pumped up at half-time and disappointed afterwards, but one of the greats of the old South Melbourne, the old Basher Williams. Let's go back to the War Room. We're just waiting. Brad Scott will join us, the North Melbourne coach, in a few moments' time. But let's go back to the War Room, boys.
Well, it's all about these guys, Ed, the Bondi billionaires. Can they get it done in the mad month of September, Jared? You'd have to say they are getting it done through the course of the year, and why wouldn't they get it done tonight? And in particular, it's this man here who is the ultimate Bondi billionaire. I want to compare the two free agents of last year, Nick Del Santo and his impact, particularly the last couple of weeks at the Kangaroos versus what Buddy's done. Not from an off-field perspective, but just on the field.
Well, he was cherry-picked, wasn't he, for his outside run, for his disposal, but I think he's undersold because he's more than that. He wins his own ball and he delivers his own ball. But I thought we saw a cameo performance last week because it wasn't just his kicking, it wasn't just his finishing, it was his setting up and his hands. They were magnificent in the way he created some plays.
I've loved his energy, and it's been surprising for me to see his leadership come across and permeate through this group really quickly. I think that he's been able to settle players like Cunnington, even Swallow, the captain's really learnt from Nick across the journey. I think his impact last week was undersold when the game was in the balance, was the real thing for me. The mix. We want to talk about the North Melbourne mix.
Well, I do, Kingy, because I think this club and this squad has been scrutinised heavily over the years, but right now, Brad Scott has got it right. He's got the mix, the chemistry, absolutely perfect. He's got the Sinister Stores and the Essence of Terror in the right mix at the present time. They've brought Wells back. They've got Swallow back. They've got a couple of blokes who are a bit slow in the middle of the ground, Zeeble and Cunnington. They've moved them into the forward line. Kane Turner has been added to the mix. He gives forward pressure. And, of course, Big Boy Brown, he replaces Mad Jack Dore, and he's just given that X factor and element of excitement.
We've forgotten about Mad Jack Dore over the last month of football, but since Cunnington and Zeeble have gone forward, Jared, that's been the difference. 13 score involvements in the forward 50 in their first 9 games combined for the year. The last 9, it's up to 42, so it's trebled. And I think Zeeble's been the wild card that Brad goes to. When he's looking at the magnets and he can't see an area where they're likely to kick a goal, he's the man who goes back and plays that under-18 style brand of football that he played so well as a junior.
Yeah, he's brilliant in the forward line, and he has been, I think, single-handedly that X factor that makes him another dangerous opponent tonight.
Could be a really awkward matchup for the Swans down back there, Red, we think, in the goal square, Jack Zeeble.
All right, let's go out to the man who'll make that decision. And Brad Scott has been good enough for the second week in a row to join us on Friday Night Football. Brad, it worked last week, so let's not break a good thing. Thanks for joining us, mate. How are you feeling?
Yeah, feeling really good, Ed. I mean, we're ready to play. We're really excited about the occasion, but we felt we've earned the right to be here, and we're ready for it.
Week in, week out, Scotty, we talk about Sydney's forward line. They're very big, powerful players. How long did you actually consider bringing in an extra tall defender?
Yeah, long time, Lynchy. I mean, it's a really tough one. I mean, I think Sydney's talls are talked about, but when you look at Rowan might go forward tonight, you know, Cunningham's there, Jetta's there, McGlynn's there. You know, they can also go small pretty quickly. So we were conscious of not being too top-heavy in defence, and you know, we want to be able to attack Sydney's forwards as well and really give some drive out of the back half. So, you know, we've gone with the 3 big key defenders down there, and then with some other guys in Wright and McDonald who can play tall.
Scotty, will that be a key component tonight? Because you talked about the players down there, Reeds, Goods, Tippett, and also Franklin. Your ability to be able to move the footy out of your back half and make sure that they defend and get them and pull them out of position. So at least on counter-attack, you've got some sort of chance.
Yeah, that's really important, Vossi. I think if we sit there and, you know, let them dictate terms and sit back and play deep forward all night, and if they get good supply, they're going to be really hard to stop. So we want to force them to defend a bit and really work with our defence to flow the ball out of the back half and make them work defensively, and hopefully that'll limit them offensively.
Brad, your forward line's going to can actually do some damage up there. Their defence looks shaky at times.
Yeah, it's interesting, Sellers, that you look at their forward half, and you know, there's been a lot of press with their big forwards in Tippett and Franklin, but you know, their back half's actually been really good. It's functioned really well, but we're going to look to make them honest tonight, and a bit of the opposite of what I just talked about, to make our forwards dangerous, but also to isolate them and make their defenders defend a bit more one-on-one than they usually do.
And Brad, the art of coaching, you've really stuck with Aaron Black. You've instilled confidence in a bloke who seemingly had none, and he's starting to just get his mojo back, and gee, could be a big influence tonight if he gets it going.
Well, he'll be an influence regardless. So, look, I really value him as a player. He's really important to our team, and you know, you're right, we did stick with him when he wasn't at his best, but you know, he's repaying the favour and really holding up his end of the bargain now.
One of the great matchups last week was Swallow and Selwood. Do you expect Swallow to go to Kennedy in this game?
Oh, well, it'd be a fantastic matchup, wouldn't it? But look, Swallow, Zeeble, Cunnington are really well equipped to play on Kennedy. That being said, I mean, Kennedy's one of the Brownlow favourites for a reason. So, you know, but all 3 of those guys are really up for the challenge, and you know, we rate them really highly as inside midfielders. But you know, Kennedy's one of their idols in a lot of ways, so it's a great opportunity for the 3 of those boys.
Yeah, Scotty, so when you find out where Swallow's going to play, can you tell us?
Oh, I've got the team sheet here if you want to have a look.
Thanks, mate. You can give us the pre-match address if you want to as well, Scotty. But, mate, thank you again, mate. We hope that we're speaking to you next week. Good luck, and we really appreciate all the effort you've given us on Fox Footy, particularly on the Friday night show. Thank you very much, mate.
I appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
Good on you, Brad Scott. A gentleman and a scholar, as they used to say in the old days. He's just been sensational in giving his time, as we just saw there, and an insight too, not just brushing us off with platitudes. He's actually given us a bit of an insight into what's going on. So you reckon Swallow to Kennedy?
I think it's Swallow and Kennedy.
Okay.
Actually, I don't know why they hide that stuff. I mean, everyone knows, and it's only 10 minutes away, so does it actually matter?
No.
It's not going to make any difference.
No, I don't think Josh Kennedy's going to go and hide in the stand, is he?
Oh, hang on. Oh, no, I'm not playing now.
All right, John Ralph is with us. Okay, Ralphie, you gave us a little bit of an entree early on, but today it's been a main course of news. Let's go with it. Let's get stuck into the Essendon drama.
Well, it was a total smackdown by Justice Middleton today, Ed. The most devastating defeat imaginable by the Essendon Football Club. Now, not only did Justice Middleton uphold the primacy of this investigation, but he almost gave no wiggle room for Essendon for an appeal. Now, legal people are saying to me they'd be stunned if Essendon did appeal, but they certainly have 21 days to consider their options. Now, this is a ticking time bomb for the Essendon football players again. Now, those show cause notices will be reissued by the ASADA anti-doping body as early as Monday. And from then, I think we all sniff a deal in the wind, potentially a Cronulla-style deal, which would see backdated penalties, maybe 6 or 8 or 10 weeks of suspension for those players. But again, let's set up the day. Here's Justice Middleton at 2 o'clock this afternoon.
By way of conclusion, in my view, ASADA complied with the rule of law in establishing and conducting, in the manner and for the purposes it did, the investigation. In addition, ASADA lawfully provided the interim report to the AFL, which has subsequently been acted upon by the AFL in bringing disciplinary charges against Essendon and Mr Hurd. On the basis of the reasons which I will now publish, the applications of Mr Hurd and Essendon are dismissed.
Now, of course, Essendon and the James Hird have to pay costs, potentially as much as $500,000 each. So that's going to put a dent in James Hird's little dalliance overseas. Here's what Paul Little and James Hird had to say outside court.
The Essendon Football Club is understandably very disappointed at today's federal court decision. Obviously, it's one that we now need to go away, deliberate, work through the findings and then determine whether or not we want to go to an appeal.
Oh, I'm very disappointed for the players, and I think this is about the players, and we're very disappointed that for our players.
Do you want to see an appeal on this?
We'll consider our options of appeal, and we'll look at that very closely.
Now, boys, I just want to break in. Jay Clark from the Herald Sun is, as we speak, reporting news that Patrick Ryder has requested a trade from the Essendon Football Club. Now, this was always possible, and we know that he was exploring that get-out clause. Now, I think what some people would say now is what happens if he accepts a deal? What happens if he says, I want a 6-week ban, and I will be at my new football club within those weeks? Now, what happens to James Hird? Well, the Essendon legend, Tim Watson, who of course is the father of the current captain, Joe Watson, this is what he said about James Hird's potential to stay on if an Essendon player accepted a ban.
Well, my view has always been this, Mitch. It would be extremely difficult and unlikely for Hirdy to proceed as coach should a player or players be penalised and forced out of the game. But that still could be a long, long way down the track if in fact that happens.
So extraordinary news, as I say, Patrick Ryder has requested a trade. He's been at clubs including Brisbane and Port Adelaide and also GWS. He will assess his options now. What happens, Ed, for those 20 players who are still at the Essendon Football Club who could accept bans and the 12 who are at other clubs or have retired since then?
Yeah, well, Paddy Ryder's an interesting one, isn't he? And we know that he'll be speaking to GWS in the next couple of days, but it's more than likely he'll end up at the Brisbane Lions. And, of course, now it gets down to the situation of whether or not Essendon can do a deal to get the best out of a bad situation, get something for Paddy Ryder. Now, you'd think that he would be a #1 draft pick swap or a first-round pick. Now, do Essendon stick to their guns and say, unless you do the deal for us, we'll take you to court and go all the way? Or do they admit defeat and let Paddy Ryder walk? That's a big decision for the Essendon Football Club going forward. The second one you bring up there, of course, Ralphie, is there are a number of players at other clubs. Stuart Crameri, and you've also got Angus Monfries at Port Adelaide. The time's ticking on season 2015 for them. So whether or not they want to get to Asada and do a deal quickly, and I know that there are a number of Essendon players who say they just will not do a deal with anyone. They don't believe they've done anything wrong. So a number of the managers that I spoke to today are having meetings with their legal representatives next week and the players to formulate their next step. But it really comes down now to whether or not what the Essendon Football Club can do with all this situation. It is going to be wide open. Mark, you're waving your hands
there.
out.
It's explode the board. The board just gone. Are they in trouble? Because they've pushed down this path. It cost a fortune to do this. No one's accepted any responsibility in this period. And they're actually the ones who are orchestrating this.
Well, there was a change in direction, wasn't there? There was, when David Evans was the president, there was let's cooperate and get the best of a bad situation. Then have changed directions. Today was obviously a major setback. But now I'm not worried about the politics of what goes on. Let's have a look at what the players are doing. And it's getting down to the situation. The time is ticking on 2015 now, not 2014. And what happens now? As a former player agent shareholder, what would be the situation this week for the player agents and the players? We look at Paddy Ryder. He's using this as a way to get out of the club.
Oh, absolutely. The Paddy Ryder crack at Essendon may turn into a chasm. And that mightn't be just for the players that are still contracted and remain on that list. That might mean the borderline delisted player that gets delisted doesn't get picked up by Collingwood because, well, you don't know what's going to happen. Is he going to be suspended or he's not going to be suspended? And we've spruiked here Essendon's resilience over the last couple of years. How resilient they've been on the field? Well, we know that off the field there's been a lot of anxiety. Now, if that's been implicated in the delisting of a player, that's when the lawsuits are really going to come out.
So what do you think? A delisted player might go and say, listen, we're going to sue you because I've been in distress for 2 years.
I haven't slept for 2 years and I haven't been able to play. I was a former #1 first-round draft pick. I haven't got a kick. I'm off the list. What did you put in my body? I think it could get very ugly.
I think with the Ryder instance, they've got no choice but to fight. I think as a club they've gone down the path where they wanted to fight what was actually presented in front of them, and now they're in a situation that if precedence is set and he ends up sliding through to a club almost for nothing, as a delisted free agent, essentially he becomes, then that opens the box. You're going to get clubs that are going to be coming at players left, right and centre. They already have.
Yeah. Well,
it's a very dangerous situation for Essendon. You're starting to lose players. You lose players through show cause notices, or you lose players through other means. That's not a good situation.
The major thing, though, is that we get back to the original point, and that is, I think my understanding from talking to a lot of the player managers today, and one in particular, was now it's time. A lot of the players are saying to Asada, right, show us what you've got.
Yeah.
Show us what you've got, and then we'll make a decision. And I know, Ralphie, you said before that Asada might be looking to do deals. Well, I don't know. If they've got something, they may not. They might have just had enough. They gave Essendon the chance. They went to court, got beaten. But I think the key thing is now, what does Asada have as way of evidence? And that's going to be obviously what it should have been in the first place, the major and key point.
And Ed, what we did see with the Cronulla situation, it didn't go to that register of findings. We saw these players that were given absolutely overwhelming evidence in regards to their guilt. And from that situation, they found it quite easy to make a deal. At this stage, we haven't seen Essendon players with any of that evidence. I think if that was presented towards them, that would make their decision a heck of a lot easier.
Yeah, well, that's the discussions that's going to happen in the next little bit. All right, I don't know if it's the end of the beginning or the beginning of the end, but at least a major step forward today, and it wasn't a good one for the Bombers. All right, let's get back to the footy, because we spoke a moment ago to Brad Scott of the North Melbourne Football Club. Our own, very own Brad Johnson has caught up with the Sydney Swans coach, John Longmire.
Thanks, John, for joining us pre-game. You've done the long trek across the ground here. It really is in fantastic shape.
Yeah, there hasn't been on here for quite a while, so it looks as though it's had a good rest, and it does look a really good surface tonight. North Melbourne, they've won 6 in a row. When you look across both sides, though, there's some key matchups right across the ground tonight. Yeah, there is. Look, they're the form side of the competition, I guess, of 6 in a row. They're in red-hot form, and they're very even. They're a hard-running team, so we'll have to be, in particular, our midfield, really good. What about your own preparations with the week off? Did you give the guys a solid hit-out at any stage, a competitive hit-out? Yeah, we had a good solid hit-out last Thursday, really solid hit-out, and then we trained again on Saturday. So we've been in this path before. We thought the train on the weekend, particularly going into a Friday night game, was important. That's what we did. And the main player to probably come out of that major hit-out was Nick Malcheski in terms of his preparations, and he's right to go. Yeah, yes, he is. I mean, he did everything. He ran Monday really hard and trained again on Wednesday and did everything possible. So our medical staff said he's right to go. And he's part of the 4 All-Australians that were inducted this week. The one that I'm interested in, though, is Nick Smith, a great young defender. And look, what's his role tonight? Will it be Lindsay Thomas? Oh, yeah, more than likely. There's no doubt. He's one of the most dangerous opposition forwards in the competition, and Smooch doesn't get much of a rest. Every week there's an opposition dangerous small forward to play on, and he's played on Lindsay a number of times, and Lindsay's such a good player, and he'll get him tonight. And also Adam Goods, 350 games, fantastic achievement. He's had many over the last couple of years, but just another one tonight. Yeah, it is. I mean, he's just, he's a fantastic player and person for this football club, and just keeps on presenting himself and enjoying his training at the moment. He's enjoying playing, so just hope he's in for a good night. And finally, John, what will be your final message as the boys run out on the ground in this big prelim final? Oh, they've really just got to back themselves. They've got to make sure they play to their strengths, both as individuals and as a team. We need to play the way that we want to play, and we know that North will probably be doing the same thing. So we just need to make sure that you're confident, back what you've done, the work to date in, and hopefully things work out okay. Well, thanks for your time. Good luck. Thanks, mate.
Currently Brad Johnson there with the former North Melbourne superstar John Longmire, of course planning his old club's demise as the coach of the Sydney Swans. And Sydney looks a picture, that's ANZ Stadium. What a highlight it was in the Sydney Olympics. Magnificent stuff. Here's the MCG though, the home of the 1956 Olympics, and we're going to be in for an absolute belter tomorrow afternoon when Port Adelaide take on the reigning champions for a place in the 2014 Toyota AFL Grand Final.
Watching Finals Footy on Fox pre-game. Brought to you by Mazda BT50.
You played with Wayne Carey and now you coach Buddy Franklin. Are there similarities there in terms of the way they play or the way they are around the club, even off field?
Well, certainly the way they play, I guess. They're different type of players. Wayne and Buddy obviously different players, but they both have big impacts on games. And we've been able to see that this year. Off the field, probably a bit different. Buddy's quite shy, quite reasonably shy, whereas you couldn't say that about Wayne.
He certainly draws my attention during games. I find myself sitting in, not ball watching, but Buddy watching during a few of our games this year.
Buddy's still going! Buddy's still going! He's unstoppable!
I think my marking's improved a little bit this season, and and my goal kicking's improved too. I've put a lot of work into it in the off-season with Nick Davis, and yeah, it's paying off, but I've got to kick the goals on the big stage in big games, and against Hawthorn 2 times I kicked a lot of points, so that was a bit disappointing, but just as long as I'm doing my practice and make sure I'm got my routine down pat, hopefully I can pay off on the big stage.
And I think he's bounced it through for a second. He's got his second goal in the space of 2 minutes.
Clearly we obviously see the goals and the marks, that sort of thing, and the runs down the middle of the ground, but a lot of the time in the review throughout the year he's been shown to, with his pressure, his chasing, his follow-up, you know, hook leading, sacrificing his role at different stages of the game for other forwards. So a lot of the time you don't see that, especially on the vision. Even at the game, you're sort of just watching the footy go around. But a lot of the time he does a lot of selfless acts and defensive acts, which are highlighted on the review on the Monday.
And it's Franklin again.
Open the goal
He
square.
might try for a 70-metre goal. And he really would be worth all the money they're paying him. Give him a longer contract.
Welcome back to Finals Footy on Fox, and we did the right thing by David King. We let him out of the war room for a good 12 hours to fly up to Sydney to meet some of their stars. And the one thing that came across there, Kingy, Buddy looks so happy, looks relaxed, and clearly he's playing good footy.
Well, Vossi, you'd be happy if you're on a million here up there, locked away for 10 years.
We'd be pretty pleased with that.
There's a couple of things we want to point out. They are happy, and why wouldn't they be? But there is a small concern up there at the moment that maybe one issue that's been transported, Jared, from 3170 out at Mulgrave there, up north to 2026 at Bondi. That's not where his contract finishes. That's the postcode at Bondi. I'm looking at the targets and the amount of times you go inside forward 50. Yeah. Clarkson was concerned about that at the Hawks. Let's track back over the last couple of years. In 2012, when the concern was raised, they were going to him 40% of the time upon entry. It was great for Buddy because he kicked 69, 64, as you can see there in that season. 2013, they weaned off him after that scare in that preliminary final. Going to him 1 every 4 entries, a drastic drop. He still kicked 60 goals, so he still pays the bills, but the greatest share was the lobe was shared between the rest of them. And this year, Sydney are almost back up to that 40% mark. As I said, he's doing his bit. He still kicks 70 goals. But it is a problem, and it does make you very predictable going inside the forward 50.
One of the problems they've got, Kingy, the numbers actually get higher when Kurt Tippett is playing. So if they're going to actually share the load, they've got to move him right out of the way.
Absolutely. And I just want to show you the one set of numbers from the preliminary final, because on one given day, this guy, he can have a bad day with his set shots. If you're going to go to him 11 times, like they did in the preliminary final against Adelaide, where the problem surfaced, you can end up with not much to show for it, Vossi. Up the ground, fantastic. Doesn't miss on the run. We know that. So there is a concern there.
There is a slight concern, but I think that their method's so good. The only thing is when that spare drops, and that's their one concern if they don't get those goals. But they can mix it up. I hope they do mix it up this week, because going into grand final week, they'll want other options.
Things have changed a little bit over the years. The matchups head-to-head, how we analyse them has changed a little bit, Jared. We tracked back and found some of your war room work from 1996.
At the opening bounce, it was pretty clear that Sydney were going to flood the back line, Ross. And what they did was take some of their, normally their half forwards, like a Lewis and a Dyson, and they put them down there, and it was almost as if Carey was a magnet. Every time the ball went near Carey, there were so many people flooding.
Few issues there, Jared. Few issues. Things starting to surface. You had a really bad watch and a bald spot that was about to set fire.
At least they had some hair back in those days, Kingy. The one problem I did have, and we weren't able to demonstrate it, was there was a rogue half-back flanker who was giving us all sorts of trouble.
This has changed a little bit the board now.
Yes.
In terms of what
let's get back to the war room 2014. They've got 2 defensive strategies, I think, the Kangaroos, and the first one is that their backs will follow up the bigs. Reid goes forward, Ferrito goes with him. Goods goes forward. I think Sam Wright will probably go with him, even McDonald. But if Buddy Franklin goes forward, then I think that helps them out. Scott Thompson, he stays back and will get either in behind or in front of Kurt Tippett. This suits them. We saw that in round 4 where Buddy turned around and kicked it to Scott Thompson. But if in fact they all stay back, which I think is likely at various stages, they have to institute plan B. And that, I think, then involves Goldstein. I think that Goldstein has to then push back and play that old role as a drop-back ruckman. We saw it save the game for them last week, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him do a lot of work there. They could push another wing. They could put Frito up on the wing and make him drop into the space. But I think they're the 2 key defensive strategies.
Well, last time they met, Thompson allowed him to go up the ground, as you said, Jared. He sat back. He had 14 intercept possessions, and he was the springboard that they needed. 66 inside 50 Sydney had this day for return of 6 goals. And this is the reason why. The extra defender was the #1 intercept man in the competition in Scotty Thompson.
And he was very effective on that day. As he said, he shut it down. And that spare becomes a factor. But if you're going to have the spare back there, then you have to get some counter-attack from it. You have to test Reid, Goods, Tippett, Franklin the other way. And when you look at Fremantle, they had Ibbotson that was dropping back. The difference was, though, that when he got back in those numbers, they couldn't change direction. They always ended up going back down the same line. We know Fremantle have started to get the ball back inside, but you see players that are free on the inside, you have to pull the trigger there. Sydney were very good at being able to shut that inside ball down and committing him down the same lane all the time. We see on the next bit of vision here from a stoppage, Ibbotson's actually blocked himself off here. Silvani takes the mark, and you pause it there, and his job is to make sure that he gets out real quick. And the reason why you do that is because it takes Tippett up the ground. You get Franklin up the ground, Reid up the ground. And again, we don't want this line committed down here because see these forwards, they're all resting. Yeah. They're waiting for the ball to come back so they can attack. So Scotty was talking about being able to get ball circulation. And the last time that they were able to play them, or the last week that they played, they got fast ball movement. It committed them. We look at the game last week against Geelong, they flicked the ball on, they got it on. You see the spare here, he ends up coming forward. But they flick it out the back, and this is the risk they've got to take against the Sydney, especially against the Sydney forwards. Back inside there, take those risks, use the numbers. The spare comes forward, as you see coming up there. Now you've got all isolated one-on-ones forward of the play, and that's okay. Go in long one-on-one. You can get it in there, put them under pressure, bang, gotcha. And that's when they get the even numbers going back the other way. The last time they played them, as you said, Thompson drops back, and they've got to take the best play option. They end up going right round the other side on this occasion, but if you see the ball movement they have, they just circulate the ball. When you've got tall players, Reid, Goods, Tippett, Franklin, you have to force them to defend so that they have less for that attack. So you see the play here.
Well, for me, the Kangaroos need a wild card tonight. In 1999, it was one man. It was Anthony Koutafidis, who stood up in the biggest game of all against the all-conquering Essendon Football Club and had some sort of last quarter. It was amazing what he was able to do, and he dragged his team across the line by 1 point, virtually stopping Essendon going on and winning the premiership that year. They were an outstanding outfit. For me, the Kangaroos need one tonight. And I think that if they don't have one, they can't win. Drew Petrie, for me, is the man. He needs to take a Richards or a Grundy to the cleaners. Who have you got, Fossey?
I don't think it's someone special. I think it's something special. I think the whole team, for me, it's the whole North team need to contribute.
Well, I'm going with the modern-day magnets, the Microsoft Surface Pro 3. It's Boomer Harvey. He's got to kick half a dozen tonight.
Jono, at the venue there at ANZ Stadium, who have you got as your man tonight to have that Cooter-type night?
Great time, Mickey. Nice and loud here at ANZ Stadium. But Daniel Wells, it is for me tonight. In 3 areas of the game are critical for him. His run to break the lines, the work that he needs to do on the scoreboard as well, hit the scoreboard, and then obviously use the skill. No turnovers tonight from Daniel Wells.
For Mazda BT50 driving the conversation, Ed, who have you got?
I reckon it's the man of the moment, Boomer Harvey. He owes the boys. He's caused enough angst in the last month, and he's a superstar, and tonight's his night. It's all set for him to repay everybody. He's just in prime time form. He's had the rest. His body's good, and he really has to fire. Lynchy, what do you reckon?
Yeah, Drew Petrie for mine is the man who could really dish up a nice sample, and he could be the man to stand up late.
Thompson to stop the big boys and push it forward.
All right, boys, we're getting ready to go. If you want to join the conversation, join us at thecrowd.foxsports.com.au to have your say on who's the cooter for the Kangaroos. Well, there's the man in his 350th game, the Australian of the Year, Adam Goods, two-time Brownlow medalist. What a superstar he's been. Buddy is the man who everyone is going to be looking at tonight. It's going to be a magnificent game of football. When we return, it's the preliminary final. North Melbourne take on the Sydney Swans. So the Kangaroos run onto ANZ Stadium, ready to go. This huge game of football, a win tonight, and the Kangaroos, known as the Jekyll and Hyde side throughout this season and the last couple of years, known for disappointments at the last minute. Well, they've got a chance to make it into the grand final. And look at that banner, 350 sensational games for Adam Goods. What a remarkable player and man he has been for the Sydney Swans Football Club and for the AFL in general, and for the people of Australia as Australian of the Year. He leads the Swans onto the ANZ Stadium, ready to go. put all that behind him because he's got one more accolade he wants, and that is another premiership medallion around his neck. Let's go to the war room now, boys. What have you got for us?
Well, this will be a tough game, Ed. This is a game where they drag both teams into the trenches, and if they're not good enough, the Kangaroos, down and dirty, Jared, they'll get mauled because the Swans, that's their brand of football. They've played that for 25 weeks already.
They have, King, and they're experts at it. And I think the Kangaroos, though, have a better arm now to compete in that department than they have been for 5 years.
Well, this is the key for them, Jared. They need a performance out of the box, as we said. And for me, the clearance game's huge. If Dalsano can get his handball game going and Goldstein can get his tap work, resulting in clearances tonight, they're a chance. Petrie needs to catch fire. He needs to take 8 or 9 marks inside the forward 50. He needs to play like the forward that he's been in his career, early days in particular. And counterpunch football, we love them at fast speed.
Well, they're the best side at it when they get their game going. Slow game is a losing game for the Kangaroos. It's got to be quick.
It's now or never, Ed.
Good on you, boys. Thanks to Microsoft Surface Pro 3, the war room is going to be in operation right throughout the game. We're ready to go. It's fantastic. Well, let's go around the grounds first of all to get our predictions. Let's go back. Lynchy, we'll go with you, mate. What have you got?
Well, I'm going to go with Jack in the box, and I think he'll have a great game. And I think with his midfield teammates in Kennedy, Parker and McGlynn, I think they'll kick the goals. They'll be the real difference tonight. It won't be as reliant on the big forwards. So I think Kieran Jack will have a PB. Previously, there's 3 goals against North Melbourne, who'll go to 4 tonight.
Fossey.
Well, I'm going with Kennedy hard to swallow. So Kennedy's form hard to swallow. So there you go. I think the matchup of Kennedy and Swallow, Kennedy will have 30 disposal and have 8 clearances.
I'm going with Buddy. This is what they bought him for. These are the games they want, and I think he'll kick a 6-pack straight up.
All right. Kingy, what have you got for us, mate?
Pretty simple, mine, Ed. Gold fingers. There's no doubt about that. The big fella, he'll get his hands to the ball. He'll set them up from the
2 weeks in a row.
Jared. Well, he's on fire, the big fella. Why get off him now? I think he'll have a PB.
Enough. Jared?
Well, I'm going with the old fella, Ed. He's been under a lot of pressure in recent times, has Adam Goodes. I think in his 350th, he's going to kick 3+ goals, and they'll see him as the man of the moment.
Says how, Jared?
Well, naturally, at the end of it, they'll all be singing this once. How I love you, my dear old Swanee.
Oh, no.
Oh, dear
over to you, Ed. The oxygen's light on in here.
Now, if I said that, I'd be in a lot of trouble. Let's go to Jono. Jono, what do you got for us?
I'm not too sure we can go after that, Ed. But look, I'm going to go with Luke Parker. Lukewarm. Well, according to the All-Australian selectors, he's lukewarm. We all know he's red hot, though, at the moment. He'll have 30+ tonight and kick 2 goals.
Good on you, mate. And I'm sticking with a little bit with Sellers, but I'm going for the Buddy Tippett. They're going to cash in. They've cashed in all year, and they're going to cash in big time tonight, and they will be the difference between these two sides.
I don't like
tonight.
it, Ed, when you go with me. I hate it when you
I
go
know,
with
the
me.
last time we went
crashed.
straight out the door together. All right, Lynchy, let's have a look at the North ladder.
Yeah, so Bastanak will start at the sub. Obviously, the one change with McMillan going out with that hamstring and Jacobs coming in. Their backline under a lot of pressure. Thompson will have a major role to play.
And for Sydney, I think the focus is the midfield. You have to get on top in that area. They just bat so deep. Kennedy, Hanbury, Parker, Jack, McVeigh, Bird, McGlynn, they'll all come through those areas. So North will have to be up there, and Bird is the sub.
All right, well, as you can see, we're 6 minutes and 27 and counting. There's Boomer Harvey. He's going to be a big influence on this game tonight. For the Kangaroos to win, they're going to have to go back to their champion once again to try and get them over the line. It's going to be a ripping game of football from ANZ Stadium when we return. It's the preliminary final. It's Sydney and North Melbourne.
You're watching Swans North. This is Prelim Finals Footy on Fox.